Good morning, crypto coiners. Today is Saturday, April 5th, 2014.
Well, it's about time you got here.
Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty. Are you listening to me?
Oh, it's down there somewhere. Let me take another look.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
Today, there is a lack of confidence in our financial system.
But we're not going to solve it with business as usual.
There is no try.
The individual is hardly anything at all. The government is all-powerful. The people are cattle. Now, some believe that the need is for a vigorous, strong man to arise on the scene, to regulate and regiment the affairs of men. Yet history tells us there have been several such. Once upon a time, there was a nation great and powerful and good. She was suffering from the aftermath of war, from a depression. And then came upon the scene a leader, an idealist, self-confident, intolerant of criticism. Wisely, he limited his early activities to combating the financial depression. Nobody could argue with that. But in a while, he began to regulate business and establish new rules to govern commerce and finance. Some of them in diametrical disagreement with the God-made laws of supply and demand, but anybody who disagreed with those new rules was promptly fired. The new leader saw that under the old system of free enterprise, landlords prospered, so he levied new taxes to take away their profits and destroy what he called the monopoly of capital. To please laborers, he controlled prices. To win the favor of the farmers, he gave them loans and subsidies. The national debt mounted alarmingly. Whenever anybody tried to tell him that governments, even as people, can go broke when they spend beyond their incomes, he said they just didn't understand deficit finance. Well, what do you say? Did he build on rock or on sand? I say on sand. For you see, this was the story of Emperor Su Tongpo, who led China to its doom more than 1,000 years ago.
That was Paul Harvey, 1960. Is it shocking how that relates even 54 years into the future? Shouldn't be, because he was talking about history and what history shows us happens when commerce and finance are controlled by a few, just what those results are to the people living under their rule. Hello, I'm Jay Steckervetz, also known as Zero Fiat, and this is a special edition of my Vertcoin Update podcast. I chose to include that audio at the beginning for several reasons, the first being that I really admire Paul Harvey. I believe that radio is truly missing a legend. The second, because even over 50 years ago, Mr. Harvey looked at the history of another great nation upon this earth and saw a lesson that needed to be shared for not just his generation, but all future generations as well. We're currently tearing down our borders, erasing the lines that separate us. Not the physical ones, of course, but the social, academic, and financial borders. 100 years ago, it'd be hard to imagine that ordering something from halfway around the world could be on your doorstep within a few days. That students could collaborate thousands of miles apart, that engineers could be in the same room at the same time, while from their perspectives, it was different days. And that friends for life could be made with someone you had never met, whose life, language, and society were completely different from your own. We live in an exciting time, a digital age of progress, one where the free thinkers are tearing off the chains of institutions and saying, we can do it differently, we can do it better. Even as new platforms rise and evolve, we've seen how hard it is to shake off the models that we've always lived with, how difficult it is to make a dichotomy, to set ourselves on a completely new path, no matter how much we understand its importance. Just a few years ago, in 2009, Bitcoin was released into the wild. The dream, a new system of accounting, eliminating the need for trusted third parties, and to break free the bonds of traditional institutional finance by distributing the power to control and secure it to the masses. To transfer money around the world in the blink of an eye, to eliminate the gouging fees of the fat cat bankers, to move outside the reach of the vicious talons holding prosperity at bay, and to empower the world to take charge of their own financial destiny. For many of the same reasons that Mr. Harvey gave in his look at the rule of Emperor Su Dong Po, Bitcoin now stands on a very delicate edge. The distribution and power to control it is becoming increasingly select. Large processing farms have sprung up, and it's becoming increasingly unreliant on the individual wallet holder. Except for a few ideological principles holding it back from becoming a newer version of what it was designed to thwart, if the history above shows us anything, ideologies only last so long. Once the power and opportunity is there, the few will be ever more tempted to act upon their own interests, and there's no promise or treaty that can ever be accepted. As human beings, we have other histories dating back thousands of years that have shown us other men who started with good intentions but ended up ruining the lives of millions and destroying entire empires in the process. Vertcoin is taking a different approach. It's not as though the developers don't like Bitcoin, quite the contrary. Vertcoin certainly wouldn't exist if it weren't for Bitcoin. It brought about a revolution that may take many years and perhaps a generation or two to complete. Truth to tell, I have no idea what this landscape will look like in 5, 10, or even 100 years, but Bitcoin was the spark that started that fire. Vertcoin's approach is simple. Keep the power distributed. Make it economically impractical to develop hardware for its computation. Instead, relying on technology that's readily available and with a low barrier of entry. While there have been hardware making headway into this scene, the Vertcoin developers are taking an active approach to keeping them out of the picture, and they've expressed time and time again their willingness and inventiveness towards keeping this a reality. The goal isn't to have a digital currency worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and control it. It's to have a digital currency that holds its value and relies on everyone who participates to maintain its security while eliminating centralized power. To know that at no time could someone alter the system as it stands, that the Vertcoin you hold is yours alone to control, and not being lorded over by someone who thinks they have a better idea in mind or who decides to disrupt the network for their own purpose. Many of the developers are just like you and I, hardworking, motivated, rational. They have day jobs, they support their families, they work towards goals that will create a better life for themselves and those that depend on them. The developers didn't pre-mine Vertcoin, hoping that someday they could dump thousands or hundreds of thousands on the market to make themselves rich. Most of them hold far less than some early adopting miners currently do. This is not a plan to make them wealthy on the backs of others. The developers are only empowered so long as the community behind them accepts their vision. They would rather develop the right digital currency for the masses, relying on their talent and ingenuity to bring forth prosperity. And they all share the vision of making Vertcoin the digital currency of the future, the digital currency of the people. I'm not saying that Bitcoin is evil, that it needs to be replaced. I feel like many inside the Bitcoin community do. There's a lot of work to be done, and perhaps it can be corrected before the balance is gone forever. I'm not saying that Vertcoin is free from any of these very same issues. It's entirely possible. However, with the active stance the developers are taking, the things I've read, and the late night talks that I've had with many of them, I believe it unlikely. It takes a little faith, as does everything in this world, and I'm not asking you to believe me just because I say you should. Think for yourself. Do the research. Ask the questions. Find the answers for yourself. The truth is out there. There's hundreds of altcoins on the scene, with many more on the horizon. Many of them making similar promises, but a large portion of them designed with one motive in mind: to make the early adopters money before they fade away into oblivion. I've always said that I believe there should be more than one digital currency, Visa and MasterCard to Bitcoin's American Express. Competition is good in any market. Eliminating a monopoly ensures that the individual can make choices because they actually have choices to make. There's other great, well-meaning cryptocurrencies out there, and I suggest that you look into them as well. Be educated. Once you've learned all you can, I believe you'll come to the same conclusion that I have. There's awesome things on the horizon, new developments being made, and progress is marching on. The time is coming when many of the other cryptocurrencies will be pounced upon by the few who can afford the expensive hardware. They'll be devoured. And while a few might strengthen at first, many more will fall. And in the end, none will be any different from the institutions already in place. The power will be centralized, and their promise to not do harm will be all that you have. I don't know about you, but for me a promise isn't good enough. It's just like building on sand. I say build upon rock. Build upon Vertcoin.
Well, it's about time you got here.
Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty. Are you listening to me?
Oh, it's down there somewhere. Let me take another look.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
Today, there is a lack of confidence in our financial system.
But we're not going to solve it with business as usual.
There is no try. There is no try.